My name is Diana, and I'm a beekeeper. And I got invited here by BEA, which is called BEEA, and they hold really nice meetups where they combine software, hardware, and significance. So everything that I try to do has some kind of relation to the world outside. I'm a beekeeper, and there's lots of trouble with bees. One is that they're dying at a rapid pace, and nobody really knows why. They know what causes it, pesticides mainly, but there's some other causes, which makes the problem really complicated. And another problem is that bees in winter, they don't go out. So from October until March, you don't see your bees. So for 5 or 6 months of the year, they're gone. So you cannot really know what's going on. And you also cannot look inside the hive because everything dies when the temperature drops below 8 degrees. So in winter, you're kind of lost as a beekeeper. You never know whether your bees are still alive or not. Now, I wanted to fix that, to know what my bees are doing in winter. So together with the University of Twente, they sent me a really excellent student of creative technology, I think. And he helped develop these bee sensors. And also a couple of other friends that are more into electronics. I'm an artist, I'm not really a programmer, and I do programming and hardware and all the other stuff only when I need it, so I'm not really a hardcore programmer. Okay, I'll show you what I made. I have the stuff with me here. The sensors have been in the hive for a year, and last June they died, or at least the SD card died, and I had to take the whole stuff out. So now they're here, and I will use the winter to make a second version, which is way better, hopefully, than this one. This one worked kind of nicely for over a year. Well, inside a beehive, there's frames, and the frames they usually look roughly like the bit on the side, but then all thirds of it will be covered with those with the honeycomb. And the honeycomb will be stuffed with either honey or larvae. So at the beginning of these sensors, I took them out at some point, and the whole sides were covered with larvae and eggs. And now at the end, in June, the larvae were all gone. They had grown up and flew away, and everything was covered with honey, which was really a nice thing. I will, well, what bees do is everything is sticky when you work with bees. So electronics will be covered in honey, which I think you can understand that it is sometimes a problem. But honey is not the biggest problem. Honey is really wet and it's really acid, so it's pretty corrosive. But they also make something else, and it's called propolis. And propolis is a kind of resin that they take from trees and they bring it home and they chew on it a bit, and then they stuff everything with propolis. That's what you also can see on this photo, all the slits that I made to have air ventilation. Within a couple of days, they just stuff it completely with propolis. So there's no way that your CO2 sensor will still be sensing anything. Yeah, this is the other side of the thing. I will show you the website that we've made, and everything, all the information is on there. This is an overview of some of the sensors that I have, and I will first go to some technical details. And the other, oh wait, I don't have them here. Where are they? Yeah, there. So, yeah, well, we used an Arduino of course, to read the sensor data. The sensor data got sent to a Raspberry Pi through a USB cable. More interesting it becomes when we go to the sensors. Yeah, we used a really regular, the little white humidity sensor. You've probably seen it before. It worked pretty fine for a year. I had no trouble with it. I'm now using them for another project where they are outside in the forest and in the city. But they have, it's really funny, it's a humidity sensor that cannot deal with humidity. So when the humidity goes over 95%, it dies. It's actually in the specs. If you look at page 10, it's like the tiny little characters, it says, cannot take humidity. Well, luckily, what bees do all day is nothing else than control their environment. So all day they are busy controlling the temperature in the hive and the humidity in the hive. And when the humidity becomes too low, they get extra water. But when it becomes too high, they just ventilate until it's all out. So I've never noticed this problem before when using it in the hive, but using it in the city, it becomes really problematic. Let's see what else we have. Yeah, we used a bathroom scale from Action. Dutch people might know Action. It's €3. It's pretty crappy, but it was. For the beehive, I need a scale that measures between 25 kilos and 70 kilos, and I want an accuracy of about 100 grams. I would prefer 50 or even 10 grams, but I've never found anything like it. So we thought a good start would be the bathroom scale. I turned out to have a couple of problems. I had two sets. One of them was under one of the beehives, and the other scale I put a 40 kilo weight on. And during the year, this 40 kilo weight dropped from 40 to 25 kilos. And also, in the daytime, it's about 0.2 degrees warmer than in the nighttime. So it's really temperature sensitive. So I should find a way to either compensate for this or to fix it. I think the reason why the scale has gone slightly off is because when you use it, when you weigh yourself, you usually have to step on it and it goes to 0 first and then you're gone. But if you stay there for a year, it probably goes off somehow. It uses its 0 point somehow. So that's probably what happened to the scale. And also, of course, when there's 40 kilo on it, the springs that are used, I don't know if there's springs in it or something that bends, I'm not really sure. It will probably, change a bit as well. Really important sensor that I wanted was the CO2. Because in winter, when the bees don't go out, you cannot really tell whether they're still alive or not, except if you measure the CO2. So they don't really move much and they don't move around much, but and also they don't control their temperature as much as in summer. So the temperature in the hive goes down pretty much, really a lot. So the sensors are on the side of the hive and the bees are all in the middle. So the temperature sensor goes down a lot as well. So that's also not a good sensor. So to know whether the bees are alive, I need the CO2. But the problem with the CO2 sensor is that it's a sensor that works by heating an element. And of course it is then heating all the electronics. And it is also using a lot of power. And that's really, I wanted to make it as low power as I could manage. And that's also because my beehives are on my roof, so I can just go with an extension cord to the beehives. But most beehives are in the field, so I would need a little solar panel to power the sensors. And this CO2 sensor is definitely not the right choice. And I'll show you later the data it gives. It gives really amazingly crappy data. It's really, it goes from 700 to 0 all the time, And I used 2 of them in 2 different hives, and one of them, it flips around a bit, but you can roughly see a trend in day and night rhythm, and the other one, it just goes berserk all the time, so it's really useless. But there are different sensors that work with an infrared, and they're like a spectrograph, so I want to try those next. What do we have here? Yeah, this is not so interesting. I also have a daylight sensor on the outside of the hive, so I can see the day and night rhythm and the amount of sunlight. It's not really useful, except that it's a nice extra thing on the graph. Yeah, it makes it easier to see why humidity goes down and up like that if you also have the day and night rhythm in the same graph. So, but I'll show you later. Well, the casing we made with the laser cutter. I've brought 2 of them, and I will show you. The one of them is really big. It's a complete frame, but it also has the Raspberry Pi and the Arduino in it. And here the CO2 sensor, the temperature sensor, power over Ethernet. That was the easiest thing most fail-proof thing we could think of. I didn't want to use Wi-Fi because it's a bit unreliable. But the main thing is that there's some kind of myth among beekeepers that Wi-Fi and GSM is the cause of bees dying. And if I want a lot of beekeepers to use these sensors, it shouldn't have something like that on it. I personally don't believe that it's the reason, but still I try to avoid using Wi-Fi. Yeah, that's the first sensor we made. So it takes up a whole compartment, which is a bit of a much space. And I think for the next one, the Raspberry Pi and the Arduino should not be inside the beehive because they need all the bees need all the space that they can get. So for the next version, we made a different one, which I showed you the photos of. So this is the little box, and it's inside a bigger frame usually, and here they can just build whatever comb they need, either for their larvae or for their honey. And it has the same sensors, but it works on the other Raspberry Pi. So I have one Raspberry Pi doing 2 sets of sensors here. Now software. Well, yeah, of course, Arduino and Python for the Raspberry Pi. We had a Node.js server, and that sends the data to our own server. What else? Yeah, it's also not so interesting. I'll show you the data, which is the most fun part. There. So the yellow bit is the day and night, or is the light sensor. So it's a day and night rhythm. The red bit is the temperature in hive number 1. The dark blue bit, what is it? It's the humidity in hive number 1. And the green one is the scale, so the weight of hive number 1. And now we're in May, so I guess it was a period with probably lots of rain. You can see that the weight of the whole box is going down, while in June it starts going up because then they start collecting lots and lots of honey. So that's how it worked. I can also switch on here scale number 2. You see it's on 0 because I took the weights off. But you can still see this day and night rhythm, see? So that's there's nothing on the scale on this month. But you can still see it goes up and down a bit. Then you have temperature number 2 for hive number 2. Hive number 2 was a really small colony, and they were also in a small box. And a small box means that it's easier for them to keep the temperature a little bit more constant. So you also see a lot less temperature movements or differences in hive number 2 than in hive number 1. Now I'll show you the horrible CO2 sensor. There it goes. This is the one that actually does something. There. Lovely, isn't it? I'll show you the other one as well. It's even more funny. Yeah. Yeah, so the CO2 sensor should be different somehow. I'm not really sure. It could also be a power problem. It could be that it didn't get enough power. Could be a voltage or something. Yeah, there's one thing that I've already discovered from this graph. There's this thing that bees do every day, and nobody knows why they do it. And it's called happy hour. So every day at about 2 o'clock in the summer, everybody's outside. And they're just hanging there, and they're just flying around a bit. And that's, if you know how bees work, it's really unlogical, because they're usually completely efficient. Everything they do has a reason. Even if they maybe don't know their reason, but it's usually quite efficient. So everybody going outside and not gathering honey, just hanging there, sounds like a lot of energy waste. And there's some theories that the young bees are learning how to fly, but I don't really believe that, because there's another theory about that as well, about the moment that young bees learn to fly. So I don't believe it. But now I looked at the sensors, and I saw that every day the weight of the scale drops a little bit at 2 o'clock, and an hour later it goes up again. So at 2 o'clock everybody goes out, and then they come back in again. And then I noticed that both the CO2 level went really high, but the sensors are really crappy, so I don't know. But also the temperature in the hive reaches about 30 degrees. And at 38 degrees, everybody dies. So it's too hot. So I think that because it becomes too warm, they get kicked out. Go outside, it gets too warm here, it's too crowded, and then they get kicked out. So that's my explanation for happy hour. But I still have to look at another year of data to know for sure whether that's the case, that they do it like that.
Could you build something that compensates with a small intake for cooler air that then they could just keep working and not have to wait?
Yeah, maybe. I could. That's one of the things I was thinking of trying, of ventilating the hive myself. But I'm a bit reluctant to do something that they are supposed to do, you know. I might disturb them. Also, one problem is that if you make a hole with a fan in it or something, what they do is when they see a hole, and they have a concept they call a bee space. The bee space is the width of one bee. And if there's a hole in the hive or anywhere else that is more than 2 bee spaces, they will cover it with honeycomb. And if it's less than 1 bee, they cover it with propolis. So if you put a fan in, it will be a week and then it's completely clotted and there will be dead bees between it trying to cover it. So and that was also the problem I had with putting a camera in. I thought it would be nice to track their door movements, to track in and out movements. So I thought, oh, maybe a light diode, you know, so I can see who comes out and who goes in. But it's impossible because they clog everything, but also because they sit in the opening all day. There's these guard bees that do nothing but walk around in the door going ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. You know, so that you cannot really count it like that. So when then I invited a friend to talk about this problem, and he brought me this radar module, and it's actually a stereo thing. And this sends out radio waves, radar waves, and gets them back. This converts it into regular sound, so you can just put it into the sound connector of the laptop, and then in Audacity or something, analyze the graph. And now I can, from the Doppler shifts, I can see whether a bee is coming in or going out. And last week I've spent a whole day testing this sensor in front of the beehive and also filming the image with also some rulers, so I know how far the movements are. So when I combine the data from this sensor that I also recorded with the movie, I should be able to measure distances and also speeds that they do. And it can measure whether a bee comes in or goes out. So that's really nice, and I got rid of the problem with the guard bees. And they don't seem to mind it much. Sometimes there's one sitting on top for a minute or so there goes your data. But most of the time they just fly by, they don't really bother much with it. So that's the last stop I'm trying to take with this. My goal with it would be to have 100 or so sensors in the whole of the Netherlands, and to spread them out around the country. So that's also why I try to make it as cheap as possible. And everything, the software, but also the hardware designs, is all open source, so I hope that other people will start changing it and making forks and doing whatever they want. And also I'm talking to scientists of Utrecht University who know a lot about bees to see whether the data I get are good enough for them to use in their research. And all the data sets will be open as well. And I hope that everybody who makes one of these will plug into my server and stream their data to my server as well, so that we have one big giant data set of all the bees in the Netherlands. Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to tell you about. So. So we have questions. Yeah?
About the scale, how do you digitize the measurements for example?
Oh, it was a digital scale, so we could just tap in on the chip that was in there.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, great.
It was actually quite easy. I was still opening it up and thinking, oops. But it was actually not so hard. We found some tips on the internet as well. It was for a completely different scale, but in the end it's all the same stuff inside. So, yeah.
Are there any other initiatives like this?
Well, I just found one, which is, funnily enough, by this Nathan something who founded Sparkfun, which is the nicest hardware place on the internet. You can order whatever you want from there. And he was messing around with it. So I sent him an email a week ago and sending him the designs of this stuff. And it would be way better for me to just buy one on Sparkfun than to have to do it myself. So it would be good, but he didn't reply on it. And there's this project called Open Beehives or something, but they only have a scale. So yeah, and that's a bit too easy, I think.
Do you know Broodminder?
Who? No.
Broodminder.
No.
It's an indie Co2 project.
Okay. It's also with sensors and.
They measure temperature and humidity.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good start. It's yeah.
Have you tried using Thermovision to monitor the movement?
No, I haven't yet, but I want to do that. It would be really nice.
Their cameras are supposed to be cheaper now.
Yeah, yeah. And I hope they can get through this because they will glue the stuff with Propolis, but I hope they can see through it. Would be nice. Yeah, yeah.
From a distance up to 5 meters.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I was once at an electronics. It wasn't a conference, but like a market, when there was this guy who had a really fancy sensor. I think he was from Siemens, and I did get his card, but I never managed to call him. So, but it would be nice. They had a really nice thermal sensor that you could just, and it also worked on a really small distance with a really broad angle. That's important that it's because the box is really small, so everything has to have a big angle.
Did it affect the production of the honey?
No, I don't think
larvae?
so.
Like how did the bees themselves accept the?
Yeah, well the photos I showed, you can tell they don't really, if they hate something, they don't go near it. And if I let's see, where do I have the photos? And here and on the other photos you can see that they actually did put all the honeycomb right next to the sensors and also their larvae, because I would think if they're bothered by it, they might put honey there, but they would never put their larvae right next to the sensors if they would feel any, but maybe they don't feel it. But the hive is really really healthy, but of course it's only been 1 year. So if after 10 years or so I notice that the hives with sensors are doing a bit less well than the others, then I can say something. But right now I think they're not bothered, but I'm not sure.
You said earlier that there's a belief that under beekeepers that high frequency radio waves are troubling the bees. You could experiment with this. I mean, it wouldn't be in the.
It's been proven scientifically that it's no harm at all. So I can, but it's a superstition, and you can't use scientific proof against a superstition. And also, of course, the radio. I'm not so sure about the radar module because I haven't yet looked up what the energy is that it emits. It could be. It's really close to there because they really sit on it. So I could imagine that this could be harmful to them. Oh yeah, and one of I was talking about why I'm not using the Wi-Fi. But of course, I cannot keep using the Ethernet cable because if a hive is 2 kilometers in the field somewhere, it will be useless. But I'm now experimenting with this LoRaWAN box. I don't know if you heard of it. It's radio and it's really a low bandwidth, but that's no problem because I do one measurement every quarter of an hour, and it's really low power, and you can go about, I think in the open field they say 10 kilometers, but let's say 5 kilometers. That's good enough. So I've now bought one of those base stations and trying to experiment with that. Yeah.
Are bees silent?
Sorry?
In the winter, are they silent?
Yeah. Yeah.
Completely silent?
Not completely, but I've put sound sensors in it, and every leaf on a tree already triggers so much more sound than the bees in total. They only make a lot of noise if you bang on the box or something. They go, woo, you know, but they usually don't make much sound. So yeah, that would have been a good. I also would have wanted to use a sound sensor because there's also a myth about along beekeepers that bees become restless when there's static electricity and thunderstorms in the air. I have never actually experienced that they become aggressive or anything from that, but everybody says so. So I thought if I would be able to measure static electricity and have something like a sound meter, then I could maybe correlate the two, but I've never managed to get the sound working properly.
As for temperature regulation, did you consider maybe trying to do water heating or in the winter or water cooling in the summer?
No.
Trying to, because you mentioned like you try to put, if you put a fan inside, they will plug it.
Yeah.
But if you just
Yeah, that could
try
be nice. And have a
like
heat
plastic
exchanger
pipe.
or something. Yeah.
Plastic pipes through
Yeah.
the
Could
board
could
and then
work.
then in the summer you can put through it cold water, in the winter
Yeah,
hot
could
water.
be. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you could
Yeah, that
help
could be
the
nice.
bees to
Yeah.
regulate.
But I'm really a big believer in having the bees do it themselves.
Yeah.
Also, they have this big problem, which is a parasite that they have and which kills them. It's one of the problems that uses the pollinator decline, causes the pollinator decline. And most beekeepers give them medication for that. Even if they don't have it, they just get the medication. But I don't do that. And the first year I lost 6 of my 8 populations, which was really harsh. And then after that I started splitting up the populations that could apparently handle the parasite. And now I have about 10 populations that are really, that can really fight the parasite themselves. So I think it's good not to mingle with them too much, not to mess with them, and let them take care of their own business.
On that subject, do you think these sensors would be able to indicate any occurrence of foul brood?
Indicate what?
Foul brood.
Oh, maybe. I think maybe that could be indicated with one of those. Yeah, maybe as well. But maybe with one of those Thermovision things, you could maybe see that. But I've never had that, and it's not really such a big problem. And also, if it's a really horrible disease that bees get, which is really contagious. And if you have it, you have to burn everything. You know, have to burn all the hives and all your tools and the sensors as well. So I've never had it, luckily. So I'm not really keen on investigating it.
Are there any other relations or correlations that you might think that might be something that came out of the data from the first year?
No, this is actually the first one that I noticed. But I'm still waiting for my hive to die in the winter. I'm not hoping for it, but if they would die, because there's not really much known about how they die, whether they die like 100 every day, or whether they all die on one day. And with this system, I would be perfectly able to see when they die, if a colony dies in winter. So that's something I'm looking for, but of course I'm also hoping that it doesn't happen.
Do you also track like external factors, like maybe make a report of the weather or the surroundings, or?
Yeah, there's temperature and humidity outside the hive. I have that as well, which is humidity outside is this one, so you can see when it rains, and temperature outside is this one. There, yeah, there.
And there's nothing new, like new insights that you figured out of that data, that maybe when it starts raining, bees all come in earlier, or?
Oh, yeah. Well, what I did find out is when it starts raining suddenly, when it's slowly becoming a miserable day, they all come back home, but they do fly sometimes 12 kilometers. So they're really gone for a while. So they have to fly for half an hour to get back home. But if it suddenly starts raining, they die. They don't come back. So I see that the hive weight goes down when they all go out. And it doesn't come up again at the end of the day. So then they die in the field. Because a raindrop for them is like this big. So, more questions? You can have a look at this stuff. Put it here. It's really sticky though. So. Yeah. Well, thank you for listening.